Let me start off by saying that I appreciate the enormous work and the arduous quest that you have been in pursuit of. And I think that no one would want to be applauding you more than I, who has been following Iran since my days in the House International Relations Committee nearly 20 years ago, and as one of the authors of the sanctions regime that are recognized to bring Iran to the negotiating table. However, I am concerned that the deal enshrines for Iran and, in fact, commits the international community over time to assisting Iran in developing an industrial-scale nuclear power program complete with industrial-scale enrichment. And while I understand the program is going to be subject to Iran's NPT obligations, I think it fails to appreciate Iran's history of deception in its nuclear program and its violations of the NPT. And it will, in the long run, I think, make it harder to demonstrate that Iran's program is not, in fact, being used for peaceful purpose, because Iran will have legitimate reasons to have advanced centrifuges and an enrichment program. We will then have to demonstrate, if in fact that is the case, that its intention is dual use and not justified by its industrial nuclear power program. That's a much more difficult burden. Now, Mr. Secretary, you've always been skeptical about sanctions. I know you sort of like embrace them here today, but when you were chairman of this committee, in a hearing on sanctions legislation that I was authoring, when the administration was vigorously arguing against it, your comment was to Wendy Sherman and David Cohen, so what you are really saying is that this is a very blunt instrument which risks adverse reaction as opposed to a calculated effort. So in that hearing, I remember I had to come back because I didn't expect that even the question of the amendment was going to come up, and they were there trying to excoriate the effort. It passed 99-0 and then subsequently was embraced by the administration as the reason why Iran has come back to the negotiating table. So let me ask, under the sanctions heading of the agreement, paragraph 26 says, and I quote, "The United States administration, acting consistent with the respective roles of the President and the Congress, will refrain from reintroducing or reimposing sanctions specified in Annex 2, which is basically the sanctions that this committee and the Congress pass, that it has ceased applying under the JPO." So, Secretary Lew, I read that to mean that we cannot reintroduce or reimpose the existing sanctions that Congress passed into law. Is that right?
Senator, we have been very clear that we retain our right and we will, if we need to, reimpose sanctions for reasons that are not nuclear if they live with the nuclear agreement and they violate other...
No, I'm talking about existing nuclear sanctions which expire next year. If snapback provisions of the sanctions are to be an effective deterrent, as the administration has suggested, of Iranians breaking the agreement, will the administration agree to support the reauthorization of the existing sanctions that passed the Senate 99-0 and which expire next year? Yes or no?
So let me be clear that the sanctions that are being lifted if Iran complies, if they comply, we said we would not reimpose nuclear sanctions if they live with a nuclear agreement.
I know, but my point is this. If you're going to snap back, you got to snap back to something. So if you're not snapping back,
Senator,
let me finish, Mr. Secretary. Mr. Secretary, please don't eat up my time. I'm sorry, with all due respect, don't eat up my time. If, in fact, the sanctions which exist that you all heralded and said brought Iran to the table expire next year, 2016, and we don't reauthorize it, there is nothing, at least in that context, to snap back to. So why won't you simply say that the administration supports, under all the same provisions, including the President's waivers, the reauthorization of those sanctions so that the Iranians know, if they violate, that the snapback will also include snapback to what the Congress passed?
Senator, what I said earlier was that right now the sanctions remain in effect. We have a regime in effect, If Iran complies, we will lift sanctions. And it's premature to talk about extending a law that is
This
not
expires next year. Iran's obligations go out at least 8 years before the ratification of the additional protocol, and that ratification only takes place if the Congress lifts the sanctions. So I don't understand how we ultimately have a credible belief that snapback means something if, in fact, you're not going to have the ability to have those sanctions in place. Let me ask this to the Secretary. Is the President willing to make a clear and unequivocal statement, not that all options are on the table, because Iran does not believe that that is a credible military threat. I think if you asked our intelligence community, that's what they would say to you, that under no circumstances will Iran be permitted to acquire a nuclear weapon. Secretary Kerry?
But that's the
Did you hear my question?
I apologize. I was just trying
Let
to
me
get
ask you,
clarification
this
on
is
that.
my question. Is President Obama willing to make a clear and unequivocal statement, not that all options are on the table, because I think if you talk to our intelligence people, they will tell you Iran does not believe that there is a credible military threat, that Iran, under no circumstances, will be permitted to acquire a nuclear weapon?
Absolutely. He has said that in many
Well, no,
times.
he said all options are on the table. I hope he makes that clear and
The President
unequivocal
has
statement.
said very clearly, under no circumstances will they be allowed to get a nuclear weapon. And in fact, I think Ash Carter reiterated publicly, very specifically on the thing. But can I
Okay,
just
no,
say-
let me, no,
Senator, but
please,
this is-
I'm sorry.
you
Let
want an
me go.
answer,
I have
right?
limited time. You've been with the
No, but
Iranians 2
limited
years.
time,
I have
but-
7 minutes.
I know, but it's worthy.
Mr. Secretary, let me ask you this. I'm seriously concerned about the lifting of the arms embargo that creeped its way into this deal. As I read the Security Council resolution on page 119, the ban on Iranian ballistic missiles has in fact been lifted. The new Security Council resolution is quite clear. Iran is not prohibited from carrying out ballistic missile work. The resolution merely says, quote, Iran is called upon not to undertake such activity. Now, previously, in Security Council Resolution 1929, the Council used mandatory language, where it said, quote, it decides that Iran shall not undertake any activity related to ballistic missiles capable of delivering nuclear weapons. Why would we accept inferior language that changes the mandatory shall to a permissive call upon? We often call upon a lot of countries to do or stop certain actions in the UN, but it doesn't have the force of shall not, which has consequences if you do. Can you answer simply, is Iran banned from ballistic missile work for the next 8 years?
They are,
No.
well,
No.
you want to answer, Senator?
Yes, I will answer
That is
it.
not accurate.
Yeah.
The exact same language that is in the embargo is in the agreement with respect to launches, and that is under Article 25 of the UN. And that is exactly where it is today in the language. But in addition to that, Iran did not want it, and we insisted on it. They are restrained from any sharing of missile technology, purchase of missile technology, exchange of missile technology, work on missiles. They cannot do that under Article 41, which is Chapter 7 and mandatory. And it does have the language
Well,
shall.
it seems, I'm
exactly-
reading to you from the Security Council resolution that was adopted codifying
the
the agreement.
Security Council
And that
resolution
Security Council resolution
says
says
column.
Iran, Mr. Secretary, I'm reading you explicit language. I'm not making this up. Iran is called upon
Correct.
not to undertake that
That's
activity.
the Article 25,
That's far
which is
different
exactly
than shall
what it is.
not.
Senator, that's exactly what it is today. That's the same language as is in the embargo now. And we transferred it to this, and that's what it is.
Not the
But
same
under that-
language as Security Council Resolution 1929. I mean, I don't know why you wouldn't just keep the same language, which made it clear that you shall not, and because there shall not exist, there are consequences if you do. Mr. Chairman, final question. I heard Senator Risch, who, I don't know whether that's true or not, Parchin. You know, the whole purpose of understanding the military dimensions of what happened in Parchin is not for Iranians to declare culpability, but in fact to understand how far they got along in their weaponization efforts. General Hayden, who was the CIA director, said, we have estimates, but they're just that. Is it true that the Iranians are going to be able to take the sample, as Senator Rich said? Because chain of custody means nothing if at the very beginning what you're given is chosen and derived by the perpetrator.
Well, as you know, Senator, that is a classified component of this. It's supposed to be discussed in a classified session. We're perfectly prepared to fully brief you in classified session with respect to what will happen. Secretary Moniz has had his team, red team that effort, and he has made some additional add-ons to where we are. But it's part of a confidential agreement between the IAEA and Iran as to how they do it. The IAEA has said that they are satisfied that they will be able to do this in a way that does not compromise their needs and that adequately gets the answers that they need. We've been briefed on it. We're happy to brief you.
My time is up, but if that is true,
I'd like Secretary
if that is
Moniz
true,
to
that
have
would
a
be the
chance.
equivalent of the fox guarding the chicken coop.
That's, Senator, I'm not confirming how it's happening. I'm simply saying to you that we are confident the IAEA has the ability to be able to get the answers that they need, and Secretary Moniz can speak quickly to that for a moment if he may. But also, do you want to say anything?
Chairman?
Sure.
Yes, as Secretary Kerry said, this is a roadmap worked out between the IAEA and Iran. They have we do not have those documents that are, as is the customary, confidential between the country and the agency. But clearly, they know that they must have and be able to articulate a process with integrity in terms of making the measurements and being able to analyze them through their own laboratories and the network of laboratories, including U.S. laboratories, that do the analysis of these kinds of samples.
Now, let me just say, burning up part of my 7 minutes, you need to go down and have that meeting. It'll take about 5 seconds. Okay? You need to go down and meet with Secretary Moniz and get that answer. I'll also add that we, as a nation, don't even have a copy